This is our last class, and we have no final exam. So I do have a final assignment. So let me touch on a couple things real quick. There's Joe. Great, I've got everyone. Let me touch on a couple things just for making sure we're all good to go to finish the semester out. So technically, all my assignments close on May 5th. I think like midnight, May 5th. So that's coming up like Tuesday. I would encourage you to go back. I'm sure almost every person is probably missing some assignment. Maybe not a couple of you overachievers, but most of you are probably missing at least one assignment. So go back and look at your grades. Right now, your grades might be artificially inflated. You might be like, hey, I got a 98%. Well, you have a 98% on the assignments that you've completed. But any assignment that's not complete is not counted towards that right now. After May 5th, they automatically all go to zeros, the ones that aren't complete, which does drop your grade. Now, if it's a 3-point assignment, it probably won't drop your grade very much. If it was a 50-point assignment, it could drop your grade, in a way that you'll notice it, a point or two. So I would recommend you go back, look and see, are you missing any assignments? Get them done, starting with whatever's the highest point value first. So if you run out of time, at least you got the big ones done. The small ones, if you're a perfectionist, if you're a person, they call it cognitive closure. If you're the person that has to have the checklist complete, it's like you cannot, rest with this semester until you've turned in everything. Good for you, and you'll probably have top grade because of getting everything done. But those of you that have to kind of make some decisions about whether you get everything turned in or not, start with the ones that are worth more points and get those knocked out. So very, very important. There will be a final assignment that'll show up on Canvas this afternoon, which is just kind of a wrap up for the semester type assignment. So it's a little review type assignment. So, and I'll need you to get that done by Tuesday. I'll close the assignments on Tuesday unless someone asks me to keep an assignment open. So if you contact me on Wednesday and say, hey, can you keep this assignment open? It could be too late. I don't know. I haven't had to deal with that before. But if you could let me know before Tuesday, hey, I'm trying to get caught up on these couple assignments. Can you keep it open for just a little longer? Then I probably can. So I want to work with you. You didn't sign up for this. You didn't plan to be, doing class on the couch or whatever. So I want to help you with that. So, but I do need communication. If you don't communicate, then I'm just going to let everything close on Tuesday, and then I will do the grading accordingly, stuff like that. So today is our last values and ethics class. Therefore, it's also going to be our last discussion about values and ethics in organizational leadership. And what I would like to do is talk about values and ethics in a college setting. So I think this would be very relevant. I think this would be easy for us to kind of wrap our minds around, right? So we all are part of a college institution. You're students, I'm faculty. Some of you have other connections. Your parents might be staff or faculty, things like that. Maybe you worked on campus, played sports, were part of the chorale, did extracurricular things on campus. Some of you, you've been part of faith for a long time. You've been attending classes for a while. Some of you might be in, just the early stages. First couple classes you've ever taken were just this year. So I'd like to talk about values and ethics in a college setting. So there was recently a big news story, and I'm not going to talk about it a lot because no need to, but another college that hired someone, and there's possible some unethical practices that happened in the way they hired the person and things like that. And it's in the news now, unfortunately, and it's a good school. And I don't want to pronounce judgment. I don't really know enough about the case, but we as a college have a responsibility to uphold the highest ethics and values of any organization, right? Because we have a testimony to uphold. We have students that we are contracted to take care of. We have parents and constituents and donors and all these things. So I want to open up a discussion about ways that colleges could get off track ethically. So what would lead to a college, and not necessarily this college, but any college is susceptible to any bad decision or whatever. But what could lead? So question one is, what could or would lead to a college making unethical decisions? Okay, so that's number one. And then what would help prevent a college from making unethical decisions? So kind of a simple conversation. I'm going to have everyone contribute to the conversation, but what would lead or could lead to a college making unethical decisions? And let's not talk about our college. Let's talk about some college that is just out there, no name college that makes decisions. And let's kind of frame the conversation. We're talking about a college. A college is responsible for providing on-campus education. Okay, it has dormitories, it has sports, it has extracurricular things. There's a lot of money donated to the college. They give out scholarships. Colleges hire faculty and staff. The faculty and staff are required to teach the things they're hired to teach. The staff are required to take care of billing and finances. There are relationships with people that make donations, boosters, parents, alumni associations. Colleges have to promise that they will deliver certain things. Colleges are members of their community. Colleges have relationships with other colleges. So if you think of all those areas, okay, get your mind beyond just this little college that we're part of here. But let's think about, other colleges, bigger schools, other contexts, but still in a college setting. What would or could lead to a college making an unethical decision, and maybe give an illustration of an unethical decision that a college could or would make? There have been a number of them in the news in the last couple of years. And if you don't think any, I'll share some with you, but I want to kind of get your brain going. So I'll take a volunteer. The good thing about volunteering is you might get everyone else's idea on the table first. Max.
You were talking about just financial aspect, donors and scholarships and stuff like that. I was thinking, I know as an example, Faith gets a lot of donations for buildings, and then there's also funds for scholarships. But thinking in a general sense of just a school, I think a situation like that where a school receives a lot of funds that are designated towards certain things that need to be allocated towards that, an unethical way that a school could behave is they say they'll allocate these funds towards something, but then they'll either pocket that or realize we can skimp here and put a lot more over here, and so without a level of accountability in how they're using the resources that they're given, whether that's someone coming and checking that or giving progress reports, something like that, without a level of accountability, then they're kind of free to do. They're using their word as we'll use this money the way we say we will, and then just kind of walk away with it. But if they have some level of accountability where they're being checked on, hey, we're using the money the way we said we would, then that can help prevent that.
Yeah, very good. And so our college here, when we talk about big money, we're probably talking about money in the hundreds of thousands. But, there are universities that are talking more like the $100 million mark for the money that comes in. Their development budgets and things like that. They have entire staffs of people. They have entire staff of people that do fundraising and things like that, and that's their full-time job. And they're bringing in millions and millions of dollars every year to do things like building, but also do things like scholarships. And so, so the unethical thing that could happen is a donor gives something to a school and the school says, yeah, we'll use this to help underprivileged or underserved students pay tuition. But before you know it, the school puts in a new swimming pool and they there's not a single additional scholarship given that year that wasn't given the previous year. Yeah, that would be a definite issue. And it's due to one of the things that could lead to that is lack of accountability, like what Max said. All right, that's kind of getting our thinking bigger. So that's where I want to go with this. What else? Someone else.
I know as far as like rules and stuff, sometimes I've heard stories on like bigger colleges or, for example, like if the dean's kids are out, breaking rules, they're kind of sliding by, getting rid, they're able to walk kind of that fine line. And if they break the rules, well, let's not do that again. And it kind of just doesn't really do anything. But if somebody else does it, then it's just this huge issue. People are getting kicked out. Sometimes law enforcement is involved. I've heard of stuff like that happening over at like Iowa State and I've had people tell me like, yeah, this kid's been doing this for a long time, but then somebody else does it that's not related to somebody higher up the chain, and all of a sudden it makes the news. It's a big deal, but that's some ethical things, whether it's the dean's kids or the president's kids or, somebody that has some power and authority. They can sometimes shovel those things under the rug that are, yeah, just because of, who dad is or whatnot. But those are
Yeah.
some things I've heard of firsthand.
Yep. So in the human resources world, I guess in all the world, but human resources would talk about ways to prevent nepotism, basically favoring someone because they're related to someone. And sure, I'm sure that happens not even just in colleges, but in all kinds of areas, But in this specific situation, so if someone has a direct connection to a decision maker or a wealthy board member or a wealthy donor, then they're treated better than someone that is just, average student that doesn't have any connections. So, yeah, that'd be a big ethical problem. And colleges have to have money, so they have to make decisions that keep themselves in business. Colleges are businesses, and so you could see how it'd be easy to justify decisions like that. Well, for the greater good, we look the other way because it'll help us stay in business, So, which that type of justification gets you in trouble every time. What else? Everyone's going to have one eventually. Noah.
I think one that we hear about a lot is on the sports side, with colleges paying athletes to come play for them, which gives them an unfair advantage over other colleges um, who are trying to do things within the rules and guidelines. And by doing this, they can bring in a lot of money for their school, and so it's easy to justify it that way.
Yep. And so in the secular college world, the NCAA has all kinds of rules about what you can and cannot give a student to come and play at your school. So you can take the family out to dinner. You cannot pay the student's mom's mortgage. You can give them the equipment, the warm-up gear, the bag, the cleats that go with the uniform. You cannot give them a brand new pair of, Yeezys every month because they're on the team. So there's all kinds of rules about that. But this whole idea of being paid to play does violate the ethics, like this code of conduct between schools where it's like, hey, these are student athletes, so they have to be a student as well. Very good. Katie, you're next.
One way I thought about something that could be unethical is like, in the sense of a professor's shoes, they could either be an instructor of a certain course and not meet the goals that that course has lined up that the students would learn. That would be unethical because it would waste the students money for having to take the course. They could also be like accepting bribes in order for the student to like get the grade up and stuff. Another way I just thought of that could be twisted is it would be unethical for a student to say like, I have a degree in such and such, But if the professor didn't teach them all those things and they don't thoroughly have a grasp of what they were taught, then that would also be lying to the employer, because the employer has the impression that they are coming into this with this degree and they have this knowledge when they actually don't.
Very good. Yeah. So a couple things. On the professor side, the ethics of value, like, are you getting the value? And there's subjective parts of that, right? So there are going to be some classes that you just don't like, and you'll be like, oh, that was a waste of time. Why did they make me take that class? So, all right. So that's everybody has something like that. But you once you cross the line of knowing that this is a worthless class, like as a professor, knowing that I'm just filling time, or we just needed them to have 3 more credits, and so I'm just forcing them to go through the motions. That is unethical. And then of course bribery is and there's a lot of ways that could happen. Some of those would be technically legal, but definitely unethical. So, if someone was making their professor banana bread every time there's a quiz, and that person magically aced every quiz, I mean, that's bribery, right? So it's just banana bread. But on the other hand, there's an ethical issue there. And then students, when they leave a college and they're like, hey, I'm an electrical engineer, but the school they went to, this happens a lot with what used to be called diploma by mail schools. Supposedly you do some distance learning, and then they send you a diploma that has a fancy name on it, has a gold seal on it, but really you paid for the diploma. It's really a mail-in thing. You didn't really learn anything. Well, so that's obviously wrong. I believe that's even illegal in the United States now. But the flip side is, you could also have that same situation if a school was not careful. Now, accrediting agencies and things like that are there. That's why accredited schools have all this extra layer of management and administration, because we have to provide that we have student learning outcomes. We have to provide samples of our grades. We have to provide samples of what we're teaching and stuff. So there are some checks and balances there, but without checks and balances, anyone could do anything, right? So, okay, who else?
I think one, you mentioned what's been in the news, and there have been people who have paid basically to have their kids accepted into the school and go to the school. So probably shouldn't do that.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't. That's terrible. The biggest ones, of course, are a couple of celebrities recently that paid for they paid a broker to do a couple things. One was this was a big deal. They had a guy that was basically a genius go in and take the SAT or ACT test for someone, and he was so good at it, they could say, okay, we don't, everyone knows my kid's not, a genius. So I don't want my child to get a perfect score, or else they'll know I'm cheating. We just need them to get a score between this number and this number. And this guy had taken it so many times and was so good at it, he could get it right down to the exact points that they needed to get the scholarship, but not raise any suspicion. So they were paying someone to do SATs and ACTs. Another thing they were doing was the parents made large donations to the school, and the school in turn put their daughters on the rowing team. So, and I'm not thoroughly familiar with Title IX, but I believe in an NCAA school, if you have a $100 scholarship for a male athlete, specifically athletic scholarship, you also have to have a $100 scholarship for a female athlete. Well, for a lot of big colleges, the sports for the men's sports are bigger team sports. Like a football team has 88 players. So it's 88. If they're giving away 88 sports scholarships to be on the football team, well, you have to find enough women's sports to be able to give out 88 scholarships as well. And so what you have is you have sometimes smaller sports It increases opportunities for ladies in sports. I don't think it's a bad thing at all. But they have to come up with an equal number of scholarships for ladies. So what they do is sometimes you'll have more obscure sports that aren't as big, like stadium sports and things. And then there's not as much accountability because, it's the rowing team or the equestrian team or the biathlon team. And these teams are small and kind of not really in the limelight. And so it's easy to slip someone in there and say, hey, yeah, they're our backup rower, but they've never been out on the rowing team before or anything like that. And that's a big one. I mean, people just went to jail for that. So that does happen. All right. Who was next? Was it Jared?
Yep.
All right.
I was just thinking of this happens with a lot of more religious schools, but often with religious schools, there's less of a lot of people find it less of a demand to have a ethical standard in some ways because I know it's the expectation for you to be there in the first place is already high enough. And so sometimes that, sometimes I think it can be a little bit of a, you can kind of drop the ball on some of the actual accountability in some areas where basically even some of the faculty or staff can really not, I mean, if you're a Christian or Catholic or, I mean, it's just a lot of that is just expected to be good already. And I mean, people still make mistakes in those areas and stuff. And sometimes you'll find that some of those more schools more on the religious side, sometimes huge things will come out and it will end up that they were actually happening for years and years, and it it finally comes out to everybody, but and then that stuff hits the news. But anyway, that kind of stuff can be a kind of a result of not I mean, it's not like you disrespect your faculty and staff just to keep them accountable. I mean, they should not have a problem with that. But it's kind of like that balance where you gotta still stay to an ethical standard, even if you are already expected to be there at a certain level, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Jared, you bring up a good point that sometimes there are assumptions, like ethical assumptions, like, oh, well, of course, everyone here is a Christian. Of course, they wouldn't lie, cheat, or steal. But it might be better to assume everyone's a sinner and at least have outlined where the boundaries ought to be, because you're dealing with people, flawed people, and every single person is capable of making really bad decisions and ruining the organization in the process by behaving unethically. And when it's not clearly outlined, I mean, there are some things that you're like, oh yeah, everyone should know that you're not allowed to take 10 reams of paper home from the photocopier room. Okay. But because everyone's a Christian and people don't steal and they know. Well, maybe you need to have something in the handbook that just talks about, hey, office supplies are for office use only. It's something like that. You hate to have a 1,000-page handbook. On the other hand, you do have to recognize that you cannot assume that people are just going to do the right thing all the time. You do have to have some kind of, and I think the bigger the institution, probably the more layers of that are just naturally going to need to happen. So good. All right, who else? Who hasn't contributed yet? Christy.
So something that I thought of was just discrimination in different areas. So like gender discrimination, racial discrimination, religious discrimination of a lot of colleges even sometimes want kids that are of like a different race or ethnicity or whatever, and because like they feel like it makes them look better or whatever, and sometimes they discriminate against like kids from America or kids from like a certain country to get what they want, like because they can get more scholarships and more grants and stuff to make them look better. And so just a lot of different issues with that.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point, and it's a sensitive subject, right? So no one wants to be like, you don't hear too many people running their political campaign based on ending reverse discrimination because it sounds so politically incorrect. But the truth is that when a school is thinking finances first, ethics second, then it's easy to justify a lot of things. And so if, let's say that so I know I had a friend, she was got a full ride scholarship 4 years in the state of Florida because her grandmother was, I believe, Seminole Indian, maybe Native American. And the state of Florida had scholarships at this time. This is probably 30 years ago. And so now she was almost 6 foot tall, blonde hair, blue eye, Swedish looking person, but one of her four grandparents was Native American, and so they had the scholarship. So nothing wrong with that. She earned it just by her heritage, and the school leveraged that. And in the state of Florida, she went to a school in Florida, a state school. Flip side is, what if a school said, you know what, we only have capacity for 5 more students, and instead of and they already have a predetermined list of these are the criteria of how we decide what students are or who we're going to choose. But they get down to the bottom of the list and they're like, yeah, but these 3 would help us look better as a more ethnically diverse school, whereas these 7 over here, or these ones that are remaining, are not going to help us with our image. Well, now they're making a decision that's not based on their values. They're making a decision based on other things that are not as honest, right? So that's why schools have to know who they are and what they believe and what their values are. It might be that a school, in an effort to become more diverse, says we are going to try to find more people in this community, this community group, this ethnic group. There's nothing wrong with that if that's part of their values. But if they start making those decisions based on money, for example, now you've crossed the ethical boundary. So, all right, who's up? Caleb, you're totally muted.
I already went.
Did you?
I already went.
What was your arm up in the air for?
I was stretching. My bicep was cramping.
Oh,
See?
I'm sorry.
Right
When you're laying in bed, that happens sometimes. Maybe you need to sit up.
I don't know what the deal with that is. I was just laying there, and all of a sudden, it's like ah.
All right. Okay, who hasn't gone? Let's hear. Alyssa.
I think one would be when there are like moral failures in like the faculty and staff, or between faculty and staff, or between professors and students, or whatever the case may be, and like the school knows about it and they just don't really do anything about it, and they just kind of try to cover it up and act like nothing's really wrong when things need to be dealt with.
Yeah.
But they want to like save the reputation of the school, so they don't do anything about it.
Yeah. So we call that circling the wagons, right? So if you ever watch any old Western movies, when the bad guys would attack the group of Conestoga wagons, the pioneers would all get their wagons in a big circle and everyone get inside and protect themselves. So sometimes colleges, in an effort to protect their reputation, make a decision that's not ethical, right? So if a college is responsible for something happened and it needs to be brought to the legal authorities, or someone needs to be fired, or there needs to be a statement made, there are ways to do it, and there's timing, and there's the appropriate language to use. but colleges should do the right thing because it's the right thing. But a lot of times colleges, just like other institutions, do something based on self-protection or reputation, whatever. And almost always, I think, especially in private institutions, Christian colleges, things like that, it comes back to haunt them, because you can't really cover something up forever. So it doesn't mean, embarrassing people that are victims or in some way trying to, if something hasn't been legally identified, you're not trying someone in public, but you do need to have swift action based on credible, evidence, and you do have to care. I think the first thing is, does the school care that the right thing's being done? And then, do they do something about it in a way that's ethical and a way that is kind of the standard legal and ethical practices of that time? So, it, and I think Christian schools are, of course, held to a higher standard naturally, and they should be. And so they got to kind of know that going into it, so they have to have a higher level of accountability before you even get to that point. And when something happens, they need to be responsible to deal with it in a way that's going to maintain the highest ethical standard. It's easy to talk about. Once you get in the middle of it, you start really questioning, it's a gut check for a school to make a tough decision and, have to have bad news out there and stuff like that. Everyone wants to have a good impression all the time. But the truth is, sometimes things have to, be dealt with in a public way. So, Joe, what were you going to bring up?
I was going to say sometimes in sports and probably mostly like football, some athletes will like do something like, it could be like some sexual thing or battery or like beating somebody up, and some schools, like, if it's a really good player, they don't want their player to not be able to play, so they could overlook it or like downplay it, even though it is a really big deal.
Yeah. Yep. So they kind of have this sliding scale of, okay, so if this person is a high value to us, we will handle the situation differently, versus if this is someone that is not a high value to us, we're going to, handle it in a standard way. So it's like special treatment, basically. And yeah. And it's wrong. I mean, it's ethically wrong. It definitely corrodes and kind of degrades the quality of the schools, the character of the school. So, all right, who hasn't gone? Has anyone not gone? Emmy, what do you think?
I think when schools prioritize like having competition with another schools, so whether they have better facilities or they have a better, just like different things like that, I think sometimes schools can prioritize image over their students because they could be spending money on, like a new sign, or even if the other sign's perfectly fine, or like a pointless thing like, a bell tower or something that they don't really need. And they prioritize that over things that students might need, like, new stuff in the dorms or new things like, updated student center or something like that. When colleges prioritize self-image on things that don't really matter at the time over the priority of the students, it kind of shows that they don't care as much about the students. They care more about their image rather than like the experience there.
Yeah, that's challenging, because in order to, like what Emmy's bringing up, I mean, this is reality. You guys are students. And so in order for any organization to make decisions, they have to have a framework. They have to have priorities and values. They have to have some ethical foundation. They have to have budgets. They have to have multiple layers of accountability. They need to have some kind of strategic thinking. So you take all that and you put it in the blender, and you have this smoothie of, okay, decisions that a school makes. And I think that you're bordering on an ethical issue if your outward message is, hey, we value students, but what's really happening on the inside is we value, whatever. We value image. We value more money for the the highest paid people on campus. We value, prestige, things like that. So yeah, it's a good point. And it's really, so sometimes when you're not involved, you have a lot of objectivity. Then you get drawn in and all of a sudden you start losing your objectivity. And there are a lot of dramas and movies and things about that, right? People that probably would have made a great decision, and then once they're in the middle of it, they kind of slowly start getting worn down and they start making decisions that are less than what they would have made, before they got in that scenario. So yeah, if you think about, so let's wrap up some of these ideas, and if any of you have any others, just jump in. But so colleges sometimes hire based on the same reasons that some of you brought up, not things that relate directly to why you're supposed to be hiring, right? So qualifications, experience, things like that, but they hire based on this person is connected to a donor, this person is a certain ethnicity, this person, whatever, this person has a certain image. So that could be an ethical issue. Sometimes colleges way overpay high-level positions, but then they don't have money for scholarships for students. Now, it's not apples to apples because sometimes those funds are segregated, like we talked about, and so there's a budget for one thing, there's a budget for other. But secular organizations have this too, where the president of the Wells Fargo's paid $100 million a year with $10 million bonuses if they grow year over year, but then they laid off 50,000 employees because they said they didn't have enough money. Those types of things are unethical. I think that when it comes to bringing in students, for example, making sure that it's not the bait and switch, that a college doesn't bring students in thinking that their school experience is going to be a certain way or that they're going to get certain things. And then when they get there, they've got them and they can't leave. Another thing, it's just like any other business that involves, I guess all businesses involve money, is a student believing that school is going to cost a certain amount, and then they get there and it costs a lot more than that. That'd be an ethical issue, right? So because once they're there, there's this peer pressure to stay. They're not going to just leave mid-semester just because they found out there's $5,000 more of charges that they weren't told about ahead of time. So now there are a lot of different government regulations and things that help protect all the different stakeholders from these things happening. I think one of the early things about donations being earmarked for certain things, schools have to maintain a very high standard for their finances ethically, because most schools, I believe, don't have to pay taxes on a number of things that other organizations of the same size. So a school like that has 500 employees, let's say a medium-sized college has 500 employees, and it's a nonprofit college, they don't have to pay taxes, I believe, on the property where the college is at, things like that. But let's say that there was a auto parts manufacturer 2 blocks away with the same number of employees, same size campus. They're paying property tax on their whole property. Well, so there's a higher level of accountability on the school who's getting all these tax breaks to make sure they're behaving in a way that the government would say, hey, you're abiding by your tax, your nonprofit status. So there's a lot of issues. And what I think happens sometimes is people with the best of intentions end up making bad decisions because they drift from their ethical foundation. And this could happen to each one of us. We get out of the controlled environment of college and we go work somewhere, and all of a sudden we're faced with a situation, and it's a small thing and it probably doesn't make that big of a difference, but we make a decision that's gray instead of black and white. And then later on we make another gray decision, and then eventually we make a decision that's probably isn't the right decision, and then we make one that's definitely not the right decision, but it could be justified. And then all of a sudden, before you know it, you're literally drowning in ethical dilemmas and ethical failures, and you get trapped. And this happens to a lot of people, a lot of Christians. I knew a guy that during the big mortgage, there was this big bubble, financial bubble that happened 20 plus years ago, and people started writing mortgages, basically making home loans to people that there was no way in the world they could afford those homes. So we talked about this a little bit early in the semester, but I know someone that actually ended up going to federal prison for this. So someone that's making $50,000 a year, and let's say they have college debt and they have a car payment, they might only be able to afford a house that's worth $150,000. So their monthly mortgage payments can be X amount. How in the world can they get approved for a mortgage that they could buy a $500,000 house? Well, people were coming up with tricky ways and kind of unethically getting people roped in, because they made all their money up front. They made their money by closing the deal and all the fees and everything, and then they sold the mortgage off to someone else, and then the person finds out 3 years later that they haven't paid a penny towards the house. They've only paid interest, and now they have to start paying, instead of $500 a month, they're going to start paying $1,500 a month, and they can't afford that. So there are a lot of people that start out thinking, I will make ethical decisions, and then, it is only a matter of time before they really, really are just, they find themselves in a place they never want to be. So the reason for this class, we used a business ethics textbook, but the reason I called the class Values and Ethics in Organizational Leadership is because each one of you will be faced with ethical decisions along the way. It might be, you might be helping hire someone. Well, in your hiring, you need to behave in an ethical way based on the values of the organization and your own personal values. You might be leading someone. You might be dealing with the finances of the organization. You might be dealing with the marketing. You might be dealing with the technology. You might be in the inner circle of the leadership or a cabinet level position, and you're advising the leader or you're holding the leader accountable. You might be on a board of some organization someday, and you're responsible to make sure the organization stays on mission. Whatever it is, you are going to have values and ethics play a part in all of your decisions. And you're going to be surrounded by people that are constantly applying values and ethics. And you might find yourself in a place where you're like, I don't feel comfortable with the decisions they're making. Maybe they haven't done anything illegal. You don't have to be a whistleblower because there's nothing they've done that you could ever prove. But you're just like, this is toxic. I don't think I want to be part of this. Could even be a Christian organization. So I wanted to make sure that at least coming through this class that you guys realize that, there are a lot of layers to this. Every chapter was a different type of ethical thing we had to think about. And some of them were things you wouldn't normally think about. Like, okay, so how do you get employees engaged in the company? And what ethical things would make an employee not feel engaged? Things like that. So, all right. So what I'd like to do is in this last minute is thank you all first off for all your feedback. Well, this has been a great class. You will have one final assignment, and I'll put that on Canvas later today. Make sure you get caught up on any work that's not done. I think there's probably some kind of class evaluation. Be honest on that. You can be as brutal as you want. Your name's not on it. No one knows who said what. So I don't get paid more or less based on your comments. But of course, I hope that you don't feel like you wasted your time or money on this class. I hope it was practical. I know sometimes it was me doing a lot of the talking and you guys having to listen. I also know you didn't sign up for having to, conduct class from, sitting on your bed or in the basement or the laundry room or wherever you're at. So some of you probably think that's an upgrade, but haven't got dressed in 3 days. But I know it's been more challenging, so I appreciate your patience, even with the technology and stuff. Depending on what happens next semester, let's say we're doing some more online stuff, I'm committed to continue to get better and better at this so that we have the absolute best possible experience. If you have any suggestions, you can let me know. Send me a message. We could Zoom, talk about it. I'd love to get feedback. I want this class to be, you know, the best, one of the best classes people ever take. So any advice I would greatly, greatly appreciate. And no final exam. So once you complete your final assignment that I'll send you and get all your work caught up, try and get it done by Tuesday if you can. If you need more time, all you got to do is let me know and I will work with you on that. So I'll keep assignments open for you if you need it. So any final questions? And look at that. I gave you 2 minutes extra. What a generous gift. At the end of your life, when you're laying there and you're on your last breath and you're like, and you're with your grandchildren and great grandchildren, and you're like, boy, these last 2 minutes were so precious. I got to see my great grandchildren for 2 extra minutes. Thank you, Mr. Baldwin, for those 2 extra minutes of life. You're welcome. See you guys later. Bye bye.